Hello everyone, welcome to Coffee Cup Enlightenment. Today's video is probably going to be a bit slightly different than what all the rest of the videos have always been, pretty much. Usually my videos are pretty much on one topic only, and that's just mindfulness. Recognizing the chatter in the head and recognizing the variances of it, recognizing the inconsistencies of it, how it comes and goes, and then through recognizing it, learning to disidentify from it, and coming up with full tips and tricks on how to disassociate with it and not take it so seriously, see the impersonalness of it, just guidance and instructions on all of that and all the variances of this substitute identity activity that goes on within us. But today's video, I know it can be a little bit distracting talking about other topics, and the substitute identity loves to sink its teeth into other topics. Hence why I haven't really gotten into other topics. I just like to stick to the one topic and keep that as the focus. But mentioning these other topics, there's a bit of similarities, and I guess some insights you can learn about, and maybe a bit of a background to myself as well about other aspects of mindfulness techniques that I've sort of learned from other organizations. But basically, my experiences, I encountered with Scientology. I had just an interest back, since I was a teenager, maybe 18 years old. Freemasons, I sort of didn't know what they were in my probably teens, probably discovered them a bit later on. And then Landmark, which is another sort of, I guess you can call it a mindfulness organization. I just wanted to share my experiences, hopefully pretty briefly, but sort of give some, maybe explain some similarities and also maybe highlight the benefits of what makes them effective. And I guess that's what causes people to join these organizations, and because everyone ultimately is just looking to some freedom. They're all got that in common, and the freedom from this monkey mind chatter. So but I guess it started when for Scientology, it was probably about 4 times in my life when I visited them. And the first one, I live in Melbourne, Australia, and the first one was in when they used to have it in Russell Street in the city in Melbourne. And it was just, I think, yeah, and what inspired that really was probably just heard some stuff on TV, but I worked in security. Probably it started in I don't know, maybe early 20s. Yeah, pretty much my early 20s. Started doing like just part-time security. Did that for about 10 years. And one of these jobs was a strike for a transport company, IPEC at the time. And back in the day, it was at Essendon Airfields. There was a big hangar there, and they just wanted about 8 or 10 guards inside the hangar 24/7, because the guys were outside burning wood. They were on strike, and all the trucks and all the transport goods were in there. So we were there for about a week. I mean, these other security guys from the neighbourhood and that, and we're just playing tennis inside this big hangar. Just some people just going and having a nap. And basically you're there asked to just come to 12 hours a day, as much as you can. If you want to do 18 or not that long, it's probably just 12 hours a day, and go home and then come back and do it again. You can do it 7 days a week, and I think it lasted over a week or something, this strike. But during my walking around the hangar, I noticed one of the boxes I was intrigued by. I didn't give a damn about all the rest of them. One of them said Scientology on it in Russell Street, Melbourne, and I opened it up, and the first thing I noticed was how peculiar, like everything was just spotlessly sort of packaged. The way it was packaged was immaculately, like a very high attention to detail in the way it was packaged. And then I saw this book. I only had one book in 80% covered styrofoam. And when I opened this book, I sort of later sort of guessed and probably learnt a little bit. Maybe it's an advanced book, but it was written in English, but I couldn't read it. It was unreadable. So it's almost like, yeah, they had their own language. So I found that very interesting, and very intrigued and curious about, wow, these people have developed. And then I think later I learnt on that's like a speed reading. That helps bring in more data in less time. So they sort of cut the words out. So it was like a speed reading book, but I couldn't actually understand it. But I don't know, I just saw some very peculiar pictures, which today I've never had an answer for. One of them was like had two drawing diagrams in it, or maybe three of them, and it said figure 1, figure 2, figure 3. And it was an A4 piece of paper with a staple on a 45-degree angle, and then a staple on a horizontal angle in the corner, and then two staples as figure 3. So it was almost like there was a language between these three papers in how you communicate, or I don't know what it was. So it was very. But that's what intrigued me to go and visit Scientology. It was just the way this book was written, and seeing these diagrams that didn't make any sense, that were very strange, and so I was just curious to see what's. I wanted to see this book again, so I packed it up and I retaped it, and then it would have got shipped off after the transport, and this was back in the early 90s. And and then when I went to the Russell Street, I was interrogated by what book are you looking for? Because back then they had bookshelves that you could go and browse, and yeah, they were pretty rough on me there. They were just saying what are you looking for, and who'd you see this book from, and where was it? What's their name? And I just made up some stuff about where I saw it. I didn't tell them that I tore open a box in the transport depot, and Scientology is basically from, and then I visited them probably 3-4 times. It was about 4 times in my life. Probably there was maybe another quick Russell Street visit, and then might have even been just 3 times in my life. And then the third one was a big one, I think, where I hanged around there for 12 hours, and I engaged in their auditing technique, and got to see the method. And basically I had to go there. I sort of already expected it, and you see a lot of stuff in the media, they're pretty rough and aggressive, and then there was a lot of forgiveness when I went. I had to just continually forgive them, because using their aggressive tactics, and they would get a beautiful sexy woman to try to allure me. She would sit next to me, but they tried, like, in that 12 hours, at least 20 different techniques. It was almost like it was orchestrated. And they already knew all these techniques, they've already done it before, and they probably knew many more, it seemed like. So it was almost like I'm just watching what I predict and expect them to do, and I forgave them as they did it. Therefore, I was not influenced or affected by whatever they offered. But I did do their test, where they give you about a couple hundred questions, and I probably shouldn't say that one was definitely not in the 90s. That was after I sort of already learnt about Eckhart Tolle for many years, and I'd already gone through some transition, and that was just wanted to when I did that written 200 question test, I pretty much clocked it. I got all the answers right. I got the homeostasis line. So basically, and then years later, I sort of realised that what that test is, what the questions, that they're very strange questions that don't make any sense, but they're questions that are like egoic. They're very ego questions. If I can give an example, someone who's done the test will know it, but the test was like, what's something, just an example? The ice cream in the ice cream truck is definitely not cold, or something. Or I don't know, it doesn't make sense, but the way it's written, it's meant to get an opinionated ego response or not. So you might say true, false, or partly true. And basically the way I did it, it was pretty much almost like enlightened. My response after 200 questions, there was no peak in the opposite spectrum of positive or negative ego. It was right in the center. And they questioned, what have you been doing? What have you done? And I said, Eckhart Tolle, But the strange thing is they just ignore you, even though you tell them the direct answer. Like, they hear it, and then they just ignore it. And another thing I observed was a tactic right at the start of this 13 hours was had like an interview for a woman on the desk at the start, and I really do feel that she used a tactic that was designed to sort of like knock your ego on its feet, off its feet. She said this one sentence, and she was looking down at the desk as she said it, and then like she said the sentence, and then she looks up and looking for the response, and as it did so, like back in my state back then, um, it sort of knocked my ego off its feet. It was almost like an intimidating sentence. I guess, but it wasn't directly intimidating or an insulting on your ego. Like if that sentence was probably whatever that sentence, I can't even remember what the sentence was. But if it was said to me today, probably have absolutely no effect. And I look at it as probably like that sentence was like the Jedi mind trick, where he says, "You will take me to your master." And the guy replies back, "Sorry, buddy, your Jedi mind tricks don't work on me." And that's what I feel it was. It was almost like probably something that they've learned from their technology. Like almost like a hypnotic spell, almost. And I just recovered on it, and she looked at my response, and she saw that I recovered from it, even though it did sort of knock my ego off its feet, whatever it was she said. And then after that, she treated me nice. And then she changed her attitude and said, "Look, we'll pay for everything. You can go to America and you can go and learn there. We'll pay all expenses trip paid." So it was almost like a bit of a test, But yeah, it's just there's so much things that went on in that 13 years. I did the auditing and I didn't find it really that effective. I had to talk about like just like past painful experience. So I imagine like I was doing a chin up at a gym a couple of years prior, and I sort of tore my trapezius muscle a little bit. So I used that as an example for the auditing session, and I told the lady I had to close my eyes and imagine what I'm seeing, and I'm smelling and tasting, and I'm feeling the knurled cold metal bar as I'm doing this chin up, and then I can feel this crack in my neck, and I can feel the pain, and I don't know, just my only observation. Actually, maybe I might give yeah. So basically, the process of I'll give the observations. I'll compare all three of them later on, but the process of doing this is to talk about the luggage of the ego and talk about it over and over again until a smile appears. So that's something you might have heard in my videos. That's something I've sort of looked on as a bit of a gem. While I might not sort of be interested in Scientology and I'm not a member, I still look at some, at least acknowledge that, hey, it's auditing session, it's getting rid of the luggage by talking about it to the point where you see it's just a story. Your consciousness is not associating with the ego's complaints about the world anymore. And that's essentially the undoing of the ego and dissolving it. Um, um, but I will comment on it now rather than compare it later. What I believe and what all these three organisations have is that they don't get rid of the ego totally. All it does is by reciting your painful experiences of the past can definitely bring awareness to how these experiences are created through perceptions, filters, and then you can remove these perception filters so now you look at the world neutral. But it doesn't get rid of the one who's created the filters in the first place, I feel. So that's why I feel that while many Scientologists do experience, and I believe and I know from speaking to Scientologists, they definitely lose a lot of luggage. And I remember one woman I've spoken to, I wholeheartedly believe her. She spoke genuinely, and she said she was a basket case before Scientology, and she totally transformed after it. So it definitely does work, but the only issue I have with Scientology is I don't believe it gets rid of the ego itself. It only gets rid of the luggage of the ego. It's not getting rid of the one that's creating the luggage, and that is the one that's created. It will get rid of most of it, but I don't know. I just really feel that from my enlightenment experience that I had a few years ago, the personal identity is ultimately most parts of it just a fiction. We when I was experiencing enlightenment, I was still an identity, but it wasn't a name or a form anymore. Identity. I was just consciousness and life itself. And everything that I associated with the Peter character was just a story. It was a good story or a bad story, predominantly bad story for most people, but ultimately was just a story. And I am not a story. I am life consciousness that gives life to that story. So that's what um, I guess Eckhart Tolle works is about. Is going beyond to where you just reside in effortless perfection of uh, of the truth of who you are as consciousness. But one thing I did acknowledge also, which I liked, when I walked across the bridge, this is at the Mount Alexander Road, Essendon, their newest and latest. It's not really the newest one now. It's been many years open there, but you walk across the bridge as you walk in, and from back years ago when it just opened, when I visited there, this was going back, who knows, maybe, yeah, at least maybe 10 years. I don't know, maybe even more than that. That was the last time I saw Scientology. It was over 10, maybe more, 15 years ago. 45 now. But it said something like in beautiful letters as you cross this bridge, this beautiful ornate bridge, it said, "You are ever perfect," or something of that nature. This is your essence, or something. It didn't say absolutely nothing like that, but that's the paraphrasing of it, which I appreciated. That I didn't understand it at the time when I read that, but now in the last few years, that makes a lot of sense. So there's a lot of good things I agree with in that, but I don't think you have to charge $1,000 an hour for people to do auditing, and you can do your own auditing every day anyway for free. That's what these videos are about. It's a basic process. And ultimately, the auditing that I'm bringing in my videos, I think, is a bit better because it gets to the root of it. It's getting to the absolute. It's the fictional character in our head, which ultimately will go in destruction. That's just the way it is. It's the nature of a fictitious character to eventually be destructive. And as long as we identify with it, then we think that we're that character. So. The importance of all the coffee cup enlightenment videos is to hopefully bring awareness of this character and don't associate with it anymore. Do identify, don't identify. As my song last week was said. The enlightenment song I'm referring to. Check out my last video done, where I got that song. But so yeah, that's Scientology in a nutshell. It does definitely have the method. And apparently the story is L. Ron Hubbard didn't invent that method, the auditing method. Him and his mate sort of came up with it, and his mate is still running uh, an organization that has the exact same auditing. I don't know. I don't think he's alive anymore, his mate, but the organization's still running and it's for free. So it does the same thing. We sit down and talk with someone where the other person guides you through asking the neutral questions, and they don't interfere, and they just get you to encourage you to speak about the negative experience over and over again until you smile. And this is called in psychology cognitive therapy. And essentially, this is what my all these videos are greatly influenced by Eckhart Tolle. For those that don't know, I listened to Eckhart Tolle for about 7 years, The Power of Now on the New Earth, as I commuted to work non-stop. And after about 1 year of listening to it, I started actually practicing mindfulness. And within the first week, I had massive enlightenment experiences. And then pretty much after about 4 years, I had a big enlightenment experience, which actually was even longer than after that. But yeah, I had a 1.5 days of enlightenment, and that's as much as that's ever happened. And but my ego is definitely much more lessened and less observe. It's much more noticed now within a second. My ego still does erupt here and there, but it doesn't last long because within pretty much in the second it's actually doing it, I'm there in the background noticing it. So I don't take it seriously anymore, and I cannot believe it anymore ever again. That's what's changed. Still might happen. Still, it's deeply believed in the background and associated with, which is why it still exists, I guess, and it still talks, and it still butts in and gives its offended and personalized opinion to situations and people. But what's changed over the 10 plus years of doing mindfulness is that I don't believe in it anymore. Next group I sort of came into contact with was Freemasons, and so I did security work as probably like a early, I don't know, maybe 20 years old, or I started and got a security license then, and maybe a couple of years later. Had a Doberman dog. Back then you were allowed to do dog work and sort of hang around in nightclubs on the outside car parks just with a dog, and it's illegal these days, I think, to do that. It's just too much public liability. But yeah, a lot of my bosses were Freemasons, so one of the bosses is still alive. He's still doing security today, and another boss, he lived up the road. They all lived in my neighbourhood. Another boss lived up the road from me. He was a security boss, and he passed away many years ago. And yeah, and so I was asked by them too, and and back then I think there was three requirements. You have to be 18, a good character, and believe in God. And I just said back then, don't really believe in God. Like, I wasn't a religious person. And these days, I have a different perspective on what, for me, God is just consciousness now. And when the consciousness dissolves all its participation in all the stories and all its association with all the stories of personalhood and identity, what's left is absolute bliss and perfection. And to me, that's God. So, and that's who everyone is underneath in the background. So there's no blasphemy in that, because blasphemy would mean that there would be someone claiming to be God, but there is no one claiming God at all. There is just God. That's it. No blasphemy. So yeah, it's hitting the quadruple twos on that one. Interesting. And that's on the time I'm referring to. I like to look at synchronistic numbers, and yeah, whenever things come up. So yeah, and so I got offered once, twice, and then the third time was probably many years later when I was doing a security job at a pub. Um, I was at the old Dandenong pub, and this guy walked in. I don't know, my alert for Freemasons was getting more interested back at that period, and I guess some of the maybe my current boss at the time was probably a Freemason as well. Most security bosses are. People involved in police and security usually are Freemasons. And but he never said nothing of that nature. So, but yes, so someone might have pointed it out that this guy looks like he's pretty keen on. I don't know how, but just I don't know. I might have just I never talked about it, but I just maybe had that inclination towards it. So yeah, this guy walks in the pub, and his name was Teddy Morton. I still remember the name. And little guy, he was probably about 5'2". This body that I'm in is about 6 foot. And big hands as well, very big hands. Not bad, pretty big hands. And he had little hands, all right? But I'll get to that later. Hang on. But it was very I don't know how you describe it. Very, very interesting what happened with him. So he was telling me he was a 31st degree Mason. There's 33 degrees is the highest level, and straight away we just got talking. Yeah, I'm a Freemason. I think he pretty much said straight away, you want to join. Straight out. Like this guy, I just sensed it as soon as he walked in. This is a Mason, and he sensed that this guy wants to be a Mason. Probably, we both connected. Like it was, like it was nothing. That's in the usual. It was very highly connected. When he walked in, we were both like magnets to each other, and yeah, we straight away got talking with and complete honesty and openness, and yes, and I said, why didn't you get, how come you can't get to 33? And he says, oh, I can't, I just can't. He wouldn't say why, why he couldn't get to 33. And And I go, is your dad, did your dad make, he said, I was telling me his dad was the captain of the army, his grandfather was the captain of the army, he was the captain of the army. He has a painting at the Dallas Brooks Hall, the Grand Lodge in Melbourne, which is now demolished. And so, and I believed him. Yeah, I couldn't verify it through the internet when I've checked it, but I do believe who he was, and definitely believe him from what he did, which I'll get into. But yeah. So, and I said, "Did your dad make the Moreton Ray Lodge?" And he just laughed at me because the Moreton Ray Lodge, it was a Freemason lodge that I drove past every day to get to the old Dandenong Inn, the pub. And now that one's been demolished as well. I think they're turning that into apartments. So yeah, all these Freemason lodges are disappearing, and I guess they're doing their meetings in a more discreet way, maybe. They don't want to do it probably in the lodges, maybe just doing it in their homes or something. So yeah, and he laughed at that. He's, just the way I straight out come off with that question, he just laughed at. But and I think I would assume that his dad did have, or someone had something to do with the making of that build. Maybe his grandfather, the Moreton Ray Lodge. And then, but this is where it get interesting. I can't remember which order he did first. Probably the first one he did was with his little hand. He put it out at 5 foot 2. He's doing some Freemason sort of putting out right. I don't know if you can see it on the video I'm doing. He's extending it straight out the arm, which is a very peculiar way to give a handshake. And he's putting it out with some sort of a Masonic hand, you know. And he's saying, "Hey, brother." He's picked out 3 guys in the pub, one at a time, within a few minutes of each other. And these guys never met him before, so they looked at him strangely, and they look at him, but they knew, and then my intuition, since he's picked out the Freemasons, he senses who they fellow Masons are because they, and I feel I can pick it out as well, as I've dissolved my ego, um, it becomes like 100 times magnified, more easier to sense the I guess the spirit in another, regardless of their external appearance. And no matter how they look or what, if they got beard or they look like they're homeless or in a tuxedo, you can look at their eyes and their sense and the way they emanate, because you see it in yourself. You recognize it 100 times more in another. So the hardest thing is yourself. Once you can dissolve your own, or get to dissolving your own ego, and as it dissolves, you start seeing other people's egos much more easier, and as you forgive and allow your own ego, becomes about tenfold more easier to forgive and allow other people's egos, and that's what makes life a lot more easier. Because then your ego's now not butting in and being personal to other people's egos anymore. So yeah, so this, anyway, getting back to the story, he put his hand out, he picked the Freemasons, which I really believe, yeah, he did pick Freemasons out. Freemasons, I mean. And these guys were all different. One was in a suit. He was probably about 50. He looked like a barrister. And the other guy was covered in grease with overalls. I had to tell him, buddy, you're in the gaming room. You got to go back to the pub. You're not allowed to dress like that in here. And he was all scruffy, covered in oil. And, he picked him out. And then he picked a young guy just like in a polo tee. And like the contrast between these 3 men were vast. Yet he picked all 3 of them. And and it's like they've never seen him before in their life, but he picked them as Masons, and then he told me a story. The old Dandenong Inn was one of the first Freemason lodges in Victoria before they had any lodges, and that's where they used to hold their monthly or weekly meetings. And what else did he, say? And then yeah, he did 3 peculiar things. So one was the picking out the Freemasons, which is no big deal. I guess most people can probably do something like that. And then the second one, he as he's talking to me, he's touching my shoulder, and he caused like all my chakras to, like, like have an orgasm, which I can do myself. If I become still and don't talk, I can go put my attention inside myself, and I get like a orgasm coming up from the base of my spine and pouring out the top of my head, and it feels like warm water, warm oil pouring out of my head. And he done that by tapping my shoulder, which again you might say, oh, that's no big deal, Pete. I guess you did it yourself, so you just maybe triggered the stillness in you, which is all your ability anyway. Um, and then the third thing um was yeah, he this is the most mystical thing. He started shaking my hand, and I didn't look down at his hand. He was up pretty close to me. We're probably only like 8 inches or 10 inches apart, chest to chest or head, and I'm looking down at him. He's looking up at me, but I wasn't looking at his hand. And he's shaking my hand, and he's saying to me, my hand's bigger than yours. My hand's bigger than yours. And as he was doing it, he made his spiritual hand, I guess that's what I call it, a spiritual hand, like or the inner body hand, bigger. His physical hand, if anyone was watching us, would it look exactly the same if anyone was watching. But his hand felt like a concrete hand, and it was giant like a bear. And that's what he did to me. And I didn't blink, and there was no fear when he did that. I just looked at him and acknowledged that he could do that, and that's fair enough. But as I heard the stories of him and that, I realized, yeah, and many years later, as I sort of looked into it, I saw that it doesn't necessarily mean that's enlightenment. Just because someone can tap into someone's spiritual powers, that can give the ego a sense of identity in those powers, and then the ego starts doing the big bear handshake on people and still keeps on living. It still keeps on existing. So to me, enlightenment means, from what I experienced a few years ago, there's the complete absence of personal identity. You're alive, and you're more alive than you ever can ever imagine and dream of, but you're not alive in the sense of this finite character, which is undergoing more changes than your mobile phone, and weekly changes, and coming online and offline every day. You're not that. It's so vast and infinite of who you are. It's gobsmacking. It's unbelievable bliss of who you are. But for some reason, we're in this realm where our ego just keeps coming back, and we keep thinking we're this personal identity, and it keeps projecting all its worries and concerns for the world. And that's just the way it is for now. And but that's my reference to to Freemasonry, is that while it can be the methods that they use is and getting to the methods, I guess they're all secrets. The only methods I can know, because even that I said, what do you do in the lodge? I've asked many Masons what you, and they won't tell me. They say, sorry, can't tell you. But the only methods I can see is that it's a movie that's a bit hard to get. It's a Johnny Depp movie on Jack the Ripper. And as we're approaching the quadruple freeze in synchronicity on the timer, but yeah, it's a movie called Jack from Hell. It's called. It's Jack the Ripper movie. With what's his name? Did I mention his name? What? Oh, hang on. Um, Johnny Depp. Yeah, I did say his name. Sorry, had a bit of a mind blank. So yeah. So, and in that movie, it shows the first initiation ceremony, and and from what I can gather, and this I sort of made this realization years later of why Freemasonry might be effective to awakening people, because ultimately all these organisations and many more, they're all got one theme in common. They got something to do with awakening, and not everyone, not a lot of people don't even know what an awakening is, or never will probably have any interest or recognition or even acknowledgement that there is such a thing as awakening. You know, so I've had many conversations over the years, even one just a week ago for a friend, and I don't know, he was just claiming it was just based on perception, and I won't get into that. That's a whole other video on itself. But in this process of in the Johnny Depp movie, I could see, and this is years later, I sort of made this realization is of why and what was actually going on, which I didn't even notice when I watched the movie. Is that when he's in the lodge, the guy, he's first. So basically, the ego is based on fear because it believes itself to be this personal character, which will eventually die. But the consciousness that is giving life to this idea is eternal and was never born and never dies. And that's why there is no fear when you're in when you're present now and you're not identified with the character. The fear only comes when you become identified as a somebody being affected by another or something. And and a story ultimately, it can even just be a story. Um, so, um, in order to curtail, I guess it's almost like bringing out the fear, that the ceremony brings out the fear of the ego, but at the same time keeps the consciousness in focused. And because who consciousness is attention and focus. So it does two things, what I believe, simultaneously in the ritual, in the ceremony, the initiation ceremony. The first thing is fear based, like so you get the ego in fear. So you might be invited to the ceremony by your father, who's a Freemason, and he's invited the son to become a Freemason. So you got somewhat trust. Oh, this is my dad's place, and my dad's friends, and so I somewhat trust these people. But still, there's some fear about the ceremony. Even your dad's not telling you about what's going to happen in that ceremony. So there's some hesitation about the ego, and it's starting to get a bit antsy, And that's what the process is meant to do: is get the heightened elevation and the antsiness of the ego a little bit higher. So how you do that? One is you put a blindfold on. So now, all right, oh, this might be my dad's organisation, but I'm feeling a bit antsy. Why do I have to be blindfolded? Where am I going? Are they going to drop me into a pit? My dad hasn't told me everything. So now you got this blindfold on. Number two, I think you got half a trouser rolled up. Um, you might be wearing one shoe or no shoes, so now your ability to run might be slightly impaired if you got one shoe on. And then you get on your knees, which is quite vulnerable. And so now you're in this dark room that you've come into. It's got no windows in it. You can feel the presence of all these men staring at you, and um, and now you've got one shoe on and you're on your knees. So that's bringing the antsiness of the ego up higher. But at the same time, now your consciousness, this is the focus part, you're reciting a 3 or 4 minute verse of what you had to, you spent a few months reciting this couple pages of what. Now, the words to it, I believe, aren't really that important. It's more giving the consciousness something to focus on in this time of transition. So it's forcing the two together, antsiness and high level of attention at the same time. Something's going to pop. It's going to be one or the other, and that's why I believe these ceremonies work. But we haven't got to the more. There's more of it, and then to add more antsiness, we put a sword to the chest. So you're like a step away from being punctured in the lung, and so that increases the antsiness even more. And then what I believe adds to the tension, and I'll go into this with Landmark, about the organisation Landmark, how it's similar to this. They have a whole row of men bringing their attention to the person in the initiation ceremony, and attention is God. Like I'm just using that word. If you don't like it, don't use it. But it's who you are. It's your essence. And you're bringing that attention to recognise the attention in another, or as the word namaste means, the meaning of it, the oneness in me recognizes the oneness in you, similar to that. But you're bringing and if you look at these, as I've watched this video maybe a couple times, um, the men look like high, so much attention, like they have the very essence of what Masons are. They got this fearlessness and I wish I had a vocabulary to describe. But yeah, they just got, I don't know, very stern and fearless, and Very typical. That's why I can spot Masons as well, from that type of attitude towards, the way they hold themselves. But these guys are actually doing something. They're giving attention to talking to each other. Two guys in the crowd, where the camera is pointed in the movie, and at the same time you can see they're giving nice, loving attention to the initiate as well. So it's amazing to see how they're doing that. Because they're so advanced, they don't need to be fully giving attention to this initiate. They can actually have a casual conversation to the person next to them and give the attention at the same time while they're looking at it. But this is just my observation, and yeah, this is what I believe causes the ultimate pop. And then when the guy takes off his blindfold, they say, allow him to see the light or something. He gasps. The initiate gasps. And that gas, I believe, is in that movie, which is overlooked when I first watched it, is actually an enlightenment experience. So it's almost like these probably I don't know. I don't think it has too much, but like the what do you call it? The B&D sex bondage. Some of the processes involved there, where some people might get some sort of liberation. I don't think that's a good analogy, but anyway. But so yeah, and that's what from my perception of just watching that video and just talking and looking at online about Freemasonry and watching videos on Freemasonry. That's just one of many aspects the way they create enlightenment is one through the initiation ceremonies, and I think just watching videos, the way they do their singing together. It's conscious singing and singing with absolute honesty, and sorry, excuse my lack of vocabulary to describe it, but it's just, yeah, it seemed, if you've watched any videos on in the insides of the Freemason lodges and how and what they do get up to and that, you can see there's some pretty beautiful stuff going on, in high levels vibrations of consciousness being emanated, and I'm sure they do it in many other things. I believe also, yeah, just from life experiences, they put you in a lot of employment situations that may be a little bit dangerous and accelerate similar to the initiation ceremony, and help you overcome that egoic fear even more. And to be like these what are they, those Maltese knights that have got absolute no fear when they're fighting with swords and that. And so yeah, but that's what I feel is the essence of Freemasonry. But ultimately, I do feel like Scientology, it doesn't really get to the essence of this dissolving the personal identity hood, which is ultimately just a story in our heads. And to me, that's ultimate liberation and enlightenment, because if you may have learnt spiritual tricks and powers and that, but if you're still if your perfectness is still associating with a limited fictional character, then obviously that's the proof that it's not enlightenment still. Why would you need a fictional character and identity as being a someone when you can have infinity and beyond? And I think there's a lot of things in the Bible that talk about that. Why would you want such insignificance when you can have the world? And I'm sure there's many phrases in the Bible we've heard that are similar to that. And then the last one was Landmark. Was nothing too special about Landmark. They're like pretty much sounded like Eckhart Tolle for 3 days. They drum you for 12 hours. Similarities they had to Freemason, which I was mentioning before. Um, as we're getting to quadruple four, interesting how each subject changes on the synchronicities. But yeah, it's Landmark it's like I don't know, established maybe 3-4 decades ago. Um, and similarities is they have two or three people in the background similar to Freemasonry. Where they're, and it's not a secret about why they're there. The lady says it where I did the course in Melbourne, and she says that they're to bring attention to the room, to bring their spotlight of attention. doesn't get mystical about it, just says it in plain simple English. And anyone with some common sense what that might mean says, okay, fair enough. And some other people think that might be strange. Why have three people standing there for 12 hours? Doesn't make sense. But for me, that sort of does make sense, And I feel that's what contributes to their enlightenment tactic, which I did experience, a small enlightenment experience, which everyone else, not, I shouldn't say everyone else, probably, who knows, maybe 80%, 90% of the class experienced it. Maybe I've heard not everyone experiences it, but I was one of the people that experienced it. So it was basically very interesting, Landmark, because when I did Eckhart Tolle, I'm trying to learn about the ego, become aware of all its facets, and learn how to not take it personally and disidentify with it, not associate with it, not take it personally, and then that's how I dissolve my ego and experience more ease and joy in life. But Landmark seemed the opposite. It's doing the opposite. It's talking about like Eckhart Tolle stuff for like an hour, and then she'll come up with a story, and she'll say, "Look, just your neighbour sitting next to you. There's about 150 or 200 people in the room sitting in chairs, and she's at the front with the whiteboard, and says, just talk to your neighbour, and she'll give a story about why it's good to talk about a certain thing, which is what I call an egoic topic, like having a whinge about something, or to the point where your ego starts crying." And I'm thinking, this is counterintuitive. This doesn't make sense. So, and because I've already done a lot of work on dissolving things and getting rid of grudges and all this, observing all ego grudges and past stuff, I had to make up an old story, remember an old story which I've let go of because I couldn't think of anything that was bothering my ego because at the time I already dissolved a lot of the stuff over the years, and so I had to recite an old grudge which didn't have a charge or power to it anymore. So I did it just to participate in the class because I was dating a girl at the time, and she did it, and she told me to do it and said it was similar to Eckhart Tolle work and that, and recommended I do it. So I did, and in a way, so I got through the first day. So yeah, I did it for an hour of like Eckhart Tolle sort of stuff. Not talking about directly mindful as I'm doing in this video. It's very indirect. So a lot of people, I guess you could describe it as a Zen technique. There's a lot of people that don't like these direct videos that as I'm talking here or Eckhart Tolle stuff. So their way is the Zen way then, which is where you don't talk about nothing. And that's what they say at Landmark. They say if anyone asks you what you learn, you tell them nothing. So I guess it's someone who learnt about Zen and actually worked out techniques about how to get enlightenment through Zen, and then developed like a business course in simple English that tells you about nothing. What did you learn at Landmark? Nothing, and it's a joke, and everyone has a laugh about it. But so that's what Zen is. It's about. It's not really about nothing. It's like, but you're still hearing words, but the words aren't actually telling you to do anything. So I guess it's neutral. So in that way, you can say it's nothing. No one's actually telling you to do anything. It's just babbling on about certain stuff that make a lot of sense. And then as people start after an hour listening to it, this has been recognised also when I got into Anthony Robbins stuff. Is the audience starts getting sleepy, and even Scientology recognizes that as it starts getting sleepy, and that's they call it the engrams are sort of coming in and affecting people's experience, or yawning is sort of a release of ego, which is sounds pretty true as well, and So this is pretty typical when you start talking about sort of consciousness stuff, and really it's not about talking consciousness, it's about the lady being in a conscious state and these people in the background being consciousness and bringing the spotlight of attention, and really that's what it's about. What she's saying is irrelevant, just like what the initiate recites in his 4 minutes of reciting or whatever, how many minutes it is in a Freemason is irrelevant, I feel. It's what's important is, can consciousness wake up through consciousness? And guess that's the essence of shamanism as well. Shamanism do absolutely no words at all. You sit down on the table, they'll blow some smoke on you, and then the shaman will, with their consciousness, will look at your consciousness, and sometimes you become enlightened in an instant. So very rare, but it does happen. I have heard stories of shaman people going to shamans with extreme mental illness of the ego, and within an instant, all of it's gone. Decades of ego gone in an instant, with no drugs, nothing. Just sitting there, lying on a bench, having smoke blown into you. And yeah, so getting back to Landmark. Um, so yeah, it's that's what I feel is the essence. It's the lady emanating her consciousness at a high vibration. The other people are helping her and assisting her, and then every hour, as the ego doesn't like it, so it starts closing its eyes and getting sleepy and tired. It gets given a feeding every hour by having this cry and the sook next to the person next to you, and they do the same to you. So it sounded counterintuitive, but it's only until the end, after the third day, is where the effects of it kicked in. So they do this for 12 hours. 1 hour of consciousness, 5 minutes of ego food, of complaining, whinging, sobbing, rehashing old stories and associating and identifying with it, associating oneself as the crier and the sobber of the story. And then so yeah, it seems strange. I didn't realize any of this when I was doing. I was just doing it, but years later, I sort of realized this is the process. And then do this for the first day. You do it for the second day for 13, 14 hours, and then on the third day, at about the 10th hour on the Sunday night, all of a sudden, it's like she's doing her talk, and it's like boom, a bomb went off in my head. It's like shell shock, and I'm looking, and people screaming, ah, ah, and the lady's pointing at the people in the classroom. She warned us like a few hours prior. She said, "Yous are all gonna pop. Yous are gonna pop like popcorn." And everyone's thinking, "What's she talking about? Popping like popcorn?" And that's what actually happened. Looks like a bomb went off. Boom. So I guess they call that a satori or an awakening. And it's like boom, and everyone's, all these people screaming and not like too crazily, but you could just hear a few screams here and there, and people are confused and what's going on, and she's like laughing and watching it, and that's what was actually, everyone was like popping like popcorn. The ego was being temporarily released from people. And that's pretty much when the class finished. And she said, "Look outside when you go out," and it was true. Yeah, the senses become magnified, similar to when I was in Leiden a few years ago. I went outside and saw orange. Um, and then when I came back inside, it was only through the perspective of outside. When I came inside, all the couches, the chairs was magnified. But that enlightenment experience was much, much more than what Landmark gave. Landmark just gave a pretty good highlight of the trees. The trees looked a little bit magnified, and it pretty much didn't last. By the time I got in the car and went home, that's it. It was finished and it was done. So it was probably only lasted, I can't remember. It was a long time ago, but it was, maybe a few hours. That's it. So it's pretty good, but for 3 days and $700, it's not bad to get an experience. I recommend it to go. Even if you've got to spare $700 to blow, I still recommend it. It's not too bad. And again, does Landmark get rid of the ego? No, I don't think it does. I've met, my ex-girlfriend had a mad ego. Underneath, of course, she's absolute perfection and consciousness, but didn't seem to do much dissolvement, or on that behalf. And that's not being egotistical by saying that. I'm just acknowledging it. It's just I was with her for 6 years, and it didn't seem to. She only went a few times to Landmark, but it didn't. Whatever was learned, she did much more classes than me. Whatever was learned, it didn't seem to address the ego, nor did her friends who were Landmark disciples. didn't seem to address that, and even the person doing the seminar definitely did not exhibit the absence of fictional characterhood. And but does that mean we have to get rid of fictional characterhood? No, like if you like even now, there's an identity I can speak as me as a Peter character. This someone speak as someone that's a male that's living in the country. And even someone like Eckhart Tolle, he still speaks himself as Eckhart. He still refer to yourself, but underneath, you know yourself as consciousness. So there's nothing wrong with still using the story of character, but underneath in the background, you know who you are as consciousness. And when the character does flare up, as it still does in me, then you don't believe in the shit anymore. It doesn't last too long, and that's the beauty. Because imagine, believing in something where you got a grudge for 10 years. That's gone now. It can't happen. I remember, the landmark lady said something really nice as well. She said, yeah, we don't do joint. You hang around us, you won't hear gossip. We don't do gossip. Which is a big thing of the ego, me and you. And did you hear that story about this girl at that desk over there and what she did? And that's all ego. It's feeding one's personal storyhood to be better than or be no more than others, and this and strengthening a fictional character in the head. So that, but there was very, like all organizations, Scientology, Freemasons and Landmark, all three of them have commendable attributes, amazingly commendable attributes. I acknowledge them all. Beautiful people, Freemasons, beautiful people in Scientology, even though a lot of them harassed me. They bombarded me with mail for like 2 years. And I don't live at that house, my old house anymore, so they're still probably sending the old house mail. And I'm talking like weekly. Every week they bombarded my mailbox, rang me every week, and very aggressive. But still they're very nice people underneath. A lot of attributes of non-personalhood identity. Of non-fear, non, you know, um, gossiping, and all the attributes of ego. The absence of that, all the absence of that. With Landmark, Scientology, and Freemasons, lots of beautiful aspects, and but the main point of this video is just to examine different. They all have one thing in common: entangle consciousness, disentanglement with form, with thoughts, with ideas, and ultimately a character idea in our head as being us, which through us identifying with it speaks on our behalf, thinks on our behalf, makes judgments on our behalf, reacts to its own judgments on our behalf, it farts on our behalf. And for me, enlightenment is getting to the point where it's very hard to associate and identify with it anymore. You immediately recognize it as it comes. You can detect it, and it does, and it gets to the point where it's like, you know, and then it gets to the point where you not don't even have to see it anymore. It just doesn't even come anymore. It's like there's um, certain things. I remember seeing a guy I hadn't seen in 10 years since high school, and the moment we met each other, it's like brought into realization all these things we used to be at 18 years old, and all the old stories and the old personal character that used to be. And as soon as our eyes met, both of us, without any words being spoken, realized that all that was gone. We both had undergone many big transformations. He had gone through Christianity and huge transformations in Christianity. He'd given himself to Jesus and undone a lot of the turmoil and inner demons within him that were, pervading his life. And for me, I'd gone through similar process through mindfulness tactics, where it, brought attention and awareness to all my inner vocabulary, and realised that it's just uh, uh, a monkey mind character. It's just a fiction in my head, It has absolutely nothing to do with who I am. Therefore, all its stories no longer have any power or meaning anymore. They're just noise and not personal. Anyway, we're getting to synchronicity again. We're getting to the 60-minute mark. That's probably time to finish. All right. Thanks everyone for watching. I don't know. Actually, I want to give a quick, brief summary. So yeah, they're all got the one thing in common, which is consciousness, becoming free from entanglement, and the other thing in common, I guess, they've got attention, like Freemasonry and Landmark both have the attention people in the background. Um, mm, and Scientology, it's bringing the smile to the illusion, recognizing the false as false. So yeah, they all got their attributes, but do you have to pay money? No. Do I have to charge for this? No. Does my ego want to charge for this? Yes, it has considered it. Yes, it said maybe if someone can donate $1 million and I can explore this and make bigger videos and that. I don't really need to do that, at least for now. I'm all right for now, even though I don't really make much money at the moment. I'm good for now. As long as I've got a phone in front of me and it hits record and I can publish it, then that's good enough. Can the videos get better? I would love to. I've been looking for years to get into editing. I've spoken to a lot of people about what editing software they have to use and that, and yeah. But one day I'll get a computer and I'll get into software editing, and maybe I'll be able to compile some stuff. There's lots of things I like to make with editing, but I think with copyright now, my dream was to make examples in movies. There's so much beautiful examples in movies, and where I can put them into a collage and then give commentary above them. But I think that breaks the copyright rule of YouTube, so I don't think that's possible. So I don't know. I don't know. There might be some other stuff maybe I could do with editing, but I don't know. Maybe cartoons. I don't know, but yeah, I don't know. Anyway, thanks everyone for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you do like it, please hit that thumbs up button and please subscribe as well. Yeah, let's see if we can get more than 100 subscribers. All right, see you everyone. Bye.